Joining us now for the program is Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us out of Bristol. Nadia Salim Said, academic, counselor, and activist, joining us out of Milton Keynes, United Kingdom as well. Hello, and I'd like to welcome you both to the program. I guess, Tony, we'll start with you. We know that the U.S., the Israeli war machine has targeted schools, used them the point of this report as military bases, but we also know that it's wiped out many schools, and basically there's nothing left of the Gaza education system at this point. Not that there's much left of its healthcare system, but there's a special impetus. I mean, usually you very well know in war times and in times of conflict, schools are usually used, even in natural disasters, you very well know, as a place to seek refuge. What kind of symbol is the regime sending out when it annihilates schools and uses them to, these nefarious ends?
Well, it's rubbing the world's nose in its genocide, isn't it? By using places as schools as prisons, centres we've just heard there for executions, military bases for launching attacks from it's hospitals and schools seem to be these prize targets that they send a psychological message to the world, and particularly to the Palestinians, by saying your most precious things in your society, where your children are educated and cared for, we're going to defile them. We're going to leave, put prison bars up around them, and we're going to launch attacks on you from them. So this is not just any old group. Euromed, Mediterranean Monitor Human Rights Group, is a Swiss Geneva-based organisation that's been brilliant, doing brilliant work. And what they've been doing is they've been far better than me, I must say, is painstakingly going through many of these hideous propaganda videos where the Israelis are just simply saying to their friends and supporters within Israel what they're doing. But what's happened is various people are identifying specific buildings that are in these videos and saying, well, actually, hang on, that's a school. These use of schools for this sort of purpose is under, I think it's the 4th Geneva Convention, is a crime, a war crime, and what they're doing is sending a very clear message, isn't it, that the most precious parts of Palestinian society are now their plaything, and they are going to, the word I would use is defile them. They are going to rub the noses of the Palestinians in that they are now in control, and not only are they going to commit these genocidal acts against the Palestinians, that they're actually going to psychologically torture them, and they're basically stealing their land, stealing everything. But they're not content to do this in a humane fashion. They've got to show their somehow moral superiority. Of course, the fact is there is no moral superiority within the Israelis at all, and their use of the religion of Judaism makes things even worse, because there are millions of Jews around the world that see this and are absolutely disgusted by the activities of what effectively is a kind of nationalistic religious cult now.
Thank you, Tony. Nadia, welcome to the program. Now, Nadia.
Thank you so much.
Nadia, what do you think this means when the regime deliberately uses schools for military purposes, and more often than not, it demolishes those schools once it's pulling out? Tell us what your initial thoughts on that and the psychological impact on the children and their families, knowing that their education facilities and education centers were used to this end once all is said and done.
There is hypocrisy and double standard at play. We can all see that. And a good question was asked to Mark Regev, the advisor to Netanyahu/Satanyahu, whether they would bomb schools and universities and hospitals had there been Hamas inside them. And obviously they could not answer. We have to keep on asking these hard questions, keep on talking about it, because clearly there are double standards, and there's psychologically, I think these are literally narcissistic psychopaths. I like to use the word pro-genocide lobby for them. Like Tony said, Judaism and Judaism and these war crimes they have nothing in common. These pro-Israeli or say pro-genocide lobby, they have absolutely nothing in common with Judaism. The 10 Commandments, 5 of them, like thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not commit adultery. We can see women have been raped again and again. We can see that there's nothing in common with Judaism and the genocide. It's very heartbreaking for all of us, but we need to keep talking about it. That's very important. The other thing that I would like to make a point here is the worst central kitchen workers were ruthlessly killed. They were killed, and no one, the international media, they came about, especially the Western media, they asked the IDF to investigate it. They couldn't investigate it because, oh, sorry, we did it again, we'll come back to you. They're investigating their own crimes. How is that aligning with the world justice? So I think we have to be very careful to keep on talking about it as much as possible.
Thank you, Nadia. And Tony, once occupation forces, we've seen them clear out of these schools and these education centers such as universities, we've seen them demolish the structures. What's the point? We know that they can't use the excuse that Hamas was using the facility because we know that they were present there. They had to be inside there. There had to be no Hamas for them to rig the place with explosives. So what is the point? What is the message that the occupation forces want to send out to the Palestinians by leveling needlessly their educational facilities?
Well, they're bulldozing their land. What they're doing is they're stealing their land. And the idea is to sell this real estate. I mean, in a way, it's a kind of glorified land grab under the guise of some sort of, religious charlatans that are doing this. You know, there's a lot of people out there make a lot of money from land. Land is one thing they're not making any more of. And also, land is the actual real source of all wealth. It's the most precious thing on the planet. So by stealing hundreds of square miles of Palestine, they're extending their power, they're extending their state. But the only way they can get away with this, really, is by, and it's a very weaselly plan they've got, which is to use the Western press, particularly in Europe and the United States and here in the UK, just to cover up these crimes. So in other words, when there's something particularly horrendous happens, you will get the Israeli spokespeople on lying, as the British comedian and Jewish guy Alexei Sayle said at Christmas time, they lie and they lie. And he carried on saying they lie for about 2 minutes, saying to give an idea of how much their lying is going on. So what they're doing when they're telling these lies about what their actions are, they're also supported by some of the big media networks in those lies. So, for example, Rupert Murdoch's media empire here in Britain is very strong. It's got radio stations, and it's got several of the major newspapers. The same is true in the United States with things like the Wall Street Journal, in Australia too, and Fox News in the States, of course, New York Post. There are lots of Murdoch, in fact, one of the most popular media outlets right across the West, including in Australia. And yet Rupert Murdoch has got invested in this company, Genie Energy, which has oil concessions in the Golan Heights. And so there's nobody on the Rupert Murdoch networks you will hear at all who will be critical of Israel for that one reason. They won't use the word genocide because they don't dare, because they know they'd be sacked by their boss if they did. And so this is the plan of the Israelis, is to try to bamboozle the Americans, the British, Australians and Europeans, and many, many viewers in the English language that are viewing this in other parts of the world, by lying, literally, and by exaggerating the claims of the Israelis, but being very biased on one side. And one thing I'd say is there's lots of similarities between this and the conflict in Northern Ireland. That I lived there during the Troubles, when we had the so-called Protestant and Catholic problems. Actually, it wasn't really a Protestant Catholic thing. It was a settler colonialist thing. The British, the loyalists, were the instigators of all the trouble. I lived in, I visited Belfast, and you could see It was the one side that was causing all the trouble, was taking the fight to the nationalists, to the Irish over there, and that was the British, the Orange Order, and we now know that the British Army was even infiltrating the highest levels of the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, so they were controlling much of both sides of that fight. They were instigating it, and I think we've seen a similar pattern in a way going on with the removal of Arafat and the replacement by Hamas, by the Israelis, and by the Western nations.
Okay, we don't have much time left, Nadia. I want to get this last question out to you. Schools, hospitals, mosques, what else? Shelters, residential structures, homes. We've seen facilities and structures targeted in this campaign that we usually either see completely off limits in other conflicts or spared, especially when there's so much disproportionality when it comes to the power and strength of the military involved. So why is Israel's policy when it comes to Palestinians and Gaza's so uncompromising?
I think they have set their mind to a Greater Israel project, and they're not going to back down. Similarly, the pro-Palestinian lobby must not back down. We should keep talking about it, go to these protests, boycott. And, we're talking about how they are always, trying to take more land, steal, kill, regardless of women and children, and also men. We don't talk about the innocent men who are dying, and it's really important to address those who are on the other side, who are sympathizing with the Palestinian. Even many Israelis out there. Let's not forget Tel Mitnick, who is an 18-year-old IDF soldier who refused to serve with the army, and he's going back into the custody. They're not releasing him. He's put his case forward. So there are some good people out there, and we must applaud them. There's Gabor Mate, a world-renowned mental health expert. There's Normal Finkelstein. So all these people who are on our side, on the side of the Palestinian, they must be, recognized and acknowledged. That's very important. And one thing that I really think we should be aware of, the Western media is suddenly, starting to talk a little bit about it, and their double standards are subsiding, which is, I think, quite performative. But it always happens when Iraq was destroyed, only then they try to save their face. When Gaza is completely flattened, they're coming out and, okay, yes, you have Piers Morgan giving genocide, giving a platform for Palestinians and for the Israelis. I have to say that this always comes right in the end, and you're forgetting we have to ask hard questions to the pro-genocide lobbyists. For instance, the case of Mahsa Amini, the lady who tragically died in custody when her headscarf wasn't appropriate. She was taken in, and the Western media was screaming and shouting at the top of their lungs. Mahsa Amini was the headlines all over the West. Now, just because that one woman, yes, it was tragic what happened, but how, and there are a lot of people in the pro-genocide lobby coming out and saying, you're not sure about the numbers, or they're inflated numbers. Well, you screamed your heart out, you were shouting and screaming when Mahsa Amini died, and you were sympathizing with her as if she was your birth sister. The journalists, everybody was coming out and showing the greatest sympathy to her and her family. Where are these journalists in the Western media? Where are these people who were claiming to love Mahsa Amini, who were, trying to, literally gang up on Iran? Where are these people? Because they're debating, it's not 34,000 people who died in Palestine. They were, the numbers, we're not sure about it. Okay, let's talk about that one woman who died giving birth in the corner of Shifa Hospital, who carrying dead pieces of her children. So let's talk about one woman, right? So there is hypocrisy, and we should be, the harder they're trying, the harder we have to try, and we've got support of the non-Muslim community. People from all walks of life are coming out to that, right?
Time has gone. I don't mean to cut you off, Nadia, but we're kind of about a minute and a half over time. I want to thank you both for joining us on the program.
Oh, no, thank you so much. Thanks.
You bet. Thank you, Tony Gosling, their historian and investigative journalist, and Nadia Salim Sayed, academic, counselor, and activist, both joining us out of the United Kingdom. And viewers, this is the end of this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.